And how does this weather going to affect conditions?
And as far as this issue here, interesting enough, I haven't heard any talk as far as this afternoon's condition rating. I guess maybe steady, maybe actually drop it, maybe 1% here. What's interesting about this chart is we have finished our work on computing our model here, where we follow these crop conditions, make yield estimates for the top 10 states, and also make a nationwide number. As of right now, we are looking at about a 176.1. This is what this model suggests right now. And keep in mind, USDA was 163, I believe it was 0.5 on this last report. So we've got an amazingly huge number. Now the bigger question is, will USDA come out with something like that next month on the July report? And the answer is no. I look back at our model, and one thing that's great about this model, it works fantastic during a normal year. It works to the dot in a normal year. In a year like this, where you have conditions as much as 8%, 10% higher than normal, this is going to inflate the yield. What usually happens in a high yield scenario like this, USDA may pick up the yield in July, maybe by about 3 bushels. So let's take a look at something like that and maybe plug this in here. Here's USDA's number here that they told us just last week, 163.4. If you do add 3 bushels here, that's going to put the bottom line number of the ending stocks, and we can have Bill move his pen so we can see here. It's going to move you from this 1.5 area, so just under 1.6 for old crop, pushing up to 1.7. And then if you add in maybe a little more corn acres at the end of this month, like some people are suggesting, you might be even up to this 1.8 area. So as of right now, we're going to plug in a 1.8, which really is not as bad as it could be. If these condition numbers stay like this all the way through, then we will have some much bigger numbers, and we'll be back in those 170s.
Now, Paul, you drove around down in southern Illinois. How the crops look there?
Well, they look like we're going to have a bumper crop. Looks fantastic, and if you looked at driving down I-55 to St. Louis, the crop looks fantastic. The couple of the things that I did hear from producers and a couple customers of mine this morning, however, is a little bit different than what Rich is talking about on soybeans, and that is there is a lot of beans in southern Illinois that still need to be planted, and in Missouri, of course, as well. But some of the Missouri producers are talking about taking preventive planting on soybeans simply because of the effect that it'll have on their insurance policy. They've had 2 years of poor crops already, and this producer said, I can't afford to take my good quality ground that I didn't get planted to beans and hope for a 30 to 35 bushel an acre yield. He said on double cropping behind wheat, you hope for a 25 bushel an acre yield. You might get a little more than that on the regular planted stuff. But after June 20th is the prevented planting date in central northern Missouri. Just the economics of it, at 30 bushel an acre, he's looking at $8.50 a bushel. He's looking at around $250 an acre gross revenue. You take some rent off of that, it doesn't leave very much for net revenue. And he says we lose money at 30 to 35 bushel an acre beans. So that is something I've heard. The crop itself, corn looks fantastic. There is no small corn. It's all covered the rows already in most cases, and did see some corn tasseling already. So that's pretty phenomenal for the middle of June.
Yeah, especially when last year it just got planted at this time.
Yeah.
Okay, so we could see less acres in beans. That makes total sense. Protect your insurance prevented yield. And we're probably going to see an ethanol announcement, but these conditions Paul talked about, is it possible yields could be bigger?
Certainly right here. And the next chart I wanted to point out was something maybe a little closer to what we're talking about. At the conference, we talked about a 173 on the high end. Just plug that in here just to see what can happen. And as I mentioned, our current number is actually 176, is what we just mentioned a little bit ago. We had a 173, and then push up in the 170s, you're pushing this 2 billion bushel mark on the ending stock.
Are you raising your demand number on that to account for a bit more ethanol?
And as we have here, as you can see by here, we've added production almost 800 million 800 million bushels, and we have added the change a little bit on the demand end. So that changes with demand too.
Okay, good.
As far as some other news we can talk about, as far as the soybean side, we're not going to mention too much here. Just point out that this morning we had the NOPA crush report, and we'll point out it was a disappointing number here. Crush during May was only 127 million bushels. That's a 10% drop from last year during May. So at this point, we had this great crushing rate running above last year, and now it's starting to weaken up here. So we will point out that as far as crush, there's maybe one little bearish issue here to speak of. Maybe a bigger issue we can talk about before this meeting is this whole announcement from the Canadian Wheat Board that maybe up to 12.5 million acres up in Canada might not get planted. And this is, of course, the key in the western areas. And that's going to be wheat, barley, and oats primarily. Here's a chart of what Canada's planted in the past few years of all their main grain crops. So if I just mentioned 12.5 million, but look at these total crops, it's about 60 million acres. That's why this is such a big deal to these guys here. Of those, we talked about oats. Oats, you're looking at just almost 4 million acres was what was hoped to be planted. Looks like maybe 3.2, maybe 3 now, as far as what they're talking to be planted. So imagine these guys dropping their crop by almost a quarter of what they expected to get planted. That's why the oats are moving right now. As far as the wheat side, we said of that 12.5 million, guesstimates range anywhere from 3 to 8 million or so being devoted for wheat. So if these guys are originally planning on planting 22 million acres, and they're getting 3 to 8 of that taken off, that's why this market is starting to move over here for the wheat side. And once we get to some wheat charts on the technical side, we'll maybe pick up some points on the upside for wheat, maybe see if we can find a target